Prokaryotic cells are relatively simple cells that do not have a nucleus and they do not have membrane-bound organelles. There's two classes of organisms that are made up of prokaryotic cells. They're bacteria and archaea, and I'm mainly focusing on bacteria. So when you look at bacteria or a prokaryotic cell, I'm going to talk about the structure and function. So starting with cell walls, the cell wall in bacteria is mainly composed of something called peptidoglycan. In gram-positive bacteria, the cell wall is thick. There's many layers of peptidoglycan. In gram-negative bacteria, the cell wall is thin. There's a thin peptidoglycan layer, and there's also an outer membrane. And the cell wall is important because it supports bacteria and prevents them from bursting due to osmotic pressure. And this is medically relevant because many antibiotics, like penicillin, target the making of peptidoglycan. So the difference in cell wall structure between gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria affects the bacteria's susceptibility to an antibiotic. So that's cell wall. Next is plasma membrane, which is also called a cell membrane. All prokaryotic cells have a cell membrane. The structure of it is it's a lipid bilayer, and it's made up of a phospholipid bilayer. The function of the cell membrane is to regulate what enters and exits cells. So this is very important. It also plays a role in energy production for prokaryotes, for bacteria. So that's the plasma membrane. Again, it's a phospholipid bilayer. All cells have a plasma membrane, and it helps with what goes in and what goes out. Things like active and passive transport, which we'll talk about later. Next is the inside of a cell. The inside of a cell is called the cytoplasm. So basically you have plasma membrane. Outside the plasma membrane, you have cell wall. And then the inside of the plasma membrane, everything inside of it is called the cytoplasm. So that's just the cytoplasm. Next, we have a nucleoid. So prokaryotic cells, bacteria and archaea, they do not have a nucleus, but they have something called a nucleoid. Nucleoid is kind of a pointless word. All it means is the area where the DNA is found in a prokaryotic or bacterial cell. So it's a region in the cytoplasm where the bacterial DNA or bacterial chromosome is. So this contains the genetic material, and it's an important area. Next, we have ribosomes. All prokaryotic cells have ribosomes. The structure of ribosomes in prokaryotic cells is, it's called a 70S ribosome, and the ribosome is made up of something called rRNA and protein. And the function of a ribosome, ribosomes are very important. It's because they make protein, and protein basically controls everything for cells, whether that's prokaryotic or eukaryotic. So there's antibiotics like tetracyclines that target bacterial ribosomes, so that's why it's important to understand that bacteria and archaea, which are prokaryotes, have a 70S ribosome. Next is flagella. Some prokaryotic cells have flagella. Flagella is made up of protein, and it helps prokaryotic cells, bacteria, move. So the function is it helps bacteria move, or archaea even move when we think of flagella. The reason why this is medically relevant is flagella can make organisms like bacteria more pathogenic or more virulent. So for example, H. pylori, which causes stomach ulcers, uses flagella to move through the mucus lining of our stomach and establish an infection. So understanding flagella is important for people who study these types of infections. Next, we have pili and fimbriae. These are also, they may or may not be present in prokaryotic cells. These are short hair-like projections on the cell's surface. Fimbriae help with prokaryotes or bacteria sticking to surfaces, while pili help with the transfer of genetic material between bacteria. We call that conjugation. So if bacteria have pili, they can be close to each other and they can exchange genetic material. This is medically relevant because fimbriae can contribute to bacterial pathogenicity by letting bacteria stick to surfaces. And also, like for example, in urinary tract infections, E. coli uses fimbriae to stick to our urinary tract. Next is capsule. Capsule may or may not be present in some bacteria. It's a gelatinous outer layer composed of polysaccharides or proteins, and it protects the bacteria even more. So bacteria can sometimes, well, all bacteria have a plasma membrane, then they can have a cell wall, and then outside of that, some bacteria have capsules. Capsules are important because, for example, the capsule of Streptococcus pneumoniae makes it difficult for our immune system to clear the bacteria, which contributes to diseases like pneumonia and meningitis. So that's why that's important. Next is plasmids. Plasmids are extra pieces of DNA. So they're small circular DNA molecules that are different from the main chromosomal DNA of the prokaryote. Plasmids carry extra genes that can provide survival advantages like antibiotic resistance to bacteria. Plasmids often carry antibiotic resistance genes, which can be transferred between bacteria. Finally is endospores. Endospores may or may not be made in some bacteria. So endospores are dormant, very resistant structures that are formed by some bacteria to survive extreme conditions. Endospores protect the bacterial genome in harsh environments like high heat or radiation, or when there's no nutrients. This is medically relevant because endospore forming bacteria like Clostridium difficile are significant in healthcare. So Clostridium difficile or C. difficile causes severe colitis, which is inflammation of the colon, and this is very big and prevalent in patients in hospitals, and its spores can survive on surfaces for very long periods of time. So that's prokaryotic cells. They don't have a nucleus, they don't have organelles. They have a plasma membrane. They may have a cell wall made up of peptidoglycan. They have ribosomes to make proteins. They have DNA. They do not have a nucleus. Just the region where the DNA is located is called a nucleoid. Some of them have flagella for movement, and then there's other stuff. So prokaryotic cells, they make bacteria and archaea.